NASA. Why into funding? Funding NASA. Why? NASA has been an abundant source of technology advancements, both in consumer fields, but also advancements in technology overall. NASA is also responsible for 18,000 jobs and plus. If we were to increase funding, it would provide more jobs and the discovery of new technologies. Misleading facts. The Fisher Space Pen. Most U.S. taxpayers believe that the official Fisher Space Pen was paid by them, but wrong. Mr. Fisher himself paid for the pen for all its technological advancements as it was in the time. He then sold the pen for a reasonable price of $2. If we look at a brief timeline history, Mr. Paul Fisher developed the pen and patented it in 1966. It then went to the Apollo 7 mission after 8 months of rigorous testing by NASA. Then we move on, and they talk about how this pen helped develop them and themselves over the years. The pen is ink forced out by compressed nitrogen at a pressure of nearly 35 psi, which in 1966 was incredibly technology advanced for a pen. The other misleading fact is the Black & Decker drill vacuum, cordless drill vacuum, the first cordless drill/vacuum, in which the astronauts could drill into the moon, recover the rock, but also not get small drill fragments on their suits or their gloves or whatnot, or the drill, so that they went back into the space pod. The small abrasiveness of the moon dust and rocks would not get into their electronics, similar how to the graphite of a regular pencil would, hence the creation of the Fisher Space Pen. And those, I think, are the two misleading facts that U.S. taxpayers think they paid for, but in fact companies on their own invested money, which leads to a multiplier-like effect of us supporting NASA, in which NASA supports other U.S. companies to build products that they need for their missions. Oh, go back here. There we go. Okay, advancements in STEM. Congress passed the National Defense Education Act in 1958, giving scholarships and other help to aspiring mathematicians, scientists, and engineers. Following that program and the funding of the NASA moon mission, the U.S. saw the most growth in GDP that we would see for a long time. Specifically, at this point in here, with the space race, where NASA funding was at its highest ever. After 1969, once we finally reached the moon and funding was dropped, doctorates in engineering and most science fields dropped. Source, Figure 2.8, Demographic Trends. Undergraduate and graduate education by the Princeton University. Side-by-side comparison. This is a percent of the federal budget over the years of NASA budget, as well as the GDP in percent by the years. And if we briefly compare the two, you'll notice that this similar, which is 58 here, as we come up with NASA funding, so does the GDP. And as we come off of the funding, it starts to dip. And then we kind of level off here. There's a little bit of a spike here. And then we just kind of come down as the years progress on. New consumer products. NASA is responsible for a lot of technologies. Some big ones are enriched baby food, which a lot of commercial baby foods contain a rich ingredient that was discovered during NASA-sponsored research on the feasibility of algae for long-term space travel. Portable cordless vacuums, developed by Black & Decker for NASA to use on the moon landings to collect samples. Food safety systems. NASA hired Pillsbury for food that had no crumbs and no bacteria for the astronauts to eat, which is important so that the crumbs wouldn't disperse and get all over in the zero-gravity environment, as well as the growth of bacteria, since they had to have food stored for long periods of time. And this helped give guidelines for the FDA. So by funding one government thing, we get advancements and other good things in other FDA or other government agencies. Here we go. This is the NASA website for, I guess it's more towards children, but you can go around and click on the different things, and they'll tell you about all the different things NAPA helped develop, including collision avoidance systems, clean burning engines. Both of these two are good for less stuff going boom, and so on. Nitrogen oxide reduction, anti-icing systems, optics, pilot stress tests, jet lag prevention, cabin and pressure devices, parachute systems, and voltage controllers, all of which are all over in our daily lives. All this also helped improve travel and the spread of making our world more globalized so that we can all trade with each other, because trade is good, making things like businessmen to jump on a jet to go over to China to discuss a new deal even easier and safer. If we go over into the household here, we can see that there's here. Things like infrared ear technology, even polished brass finishes that we like, battery solid water softeners, reflective insulators, memory metal alloys, cosmetics, ingestible toothpaste, all good things, and even on and on. It's hard to escape the things that NASA helped develop for our world. This article by the Cowbirds UK-based environmental engineering blog pointed out that they came up with a ratio of 14 to 1. That is, for every dollar spent on a NASA mission, the U.S. would receive a benefit of $14. By 1976, research from the Moon mission had already benefited the aerospace and interstate computer industry, car industry, and international communications industry, just to name a few. I have no doubt that technology advances of today still owe their existence of the Apollo mission, and I haven't even covered the scientific research and technology that we currently have that were discovered and invented by little girls and girls who watched the moon landings and grew up wanting to be physicists, engineers. Here's the article of the budget for NASA. And if we look, funding is dropping and dropping. If you see in 1969, 68 here, 67, we were at about double of what we had in 2014, and pretty close to what we'll have in 2015. NASA had its best accomplishments in the late 60s here, when they had around $30,000 million, and now we're giving them about half that. So how could we ever expect them to develop and design and create as much? Here's also our source for this graph. And more technology are satellites, which have become very important between GPSs in our phones, cars, and even separate GPS devices like this one here. The Dustbuster, of course, scratch-resistant lenses, and better glasses for things like laptop screens, safety glasses, camera lenses, TVs, 4K TVs, your retina screens, memory foam, mattresses or pillows that you lay on, and light-emitting diodes, or LEDs, which are everywhere nowadays, is indicating lights or the backlights on screens, and or even just pretty colors to make things like this. Above and beyond, the future of NASA. NASA helps maintain the United States leadership in aviation, which is a key economic driver for the nation. I myself work at the airport. NASA facilitates about $1.5 trillion in economic activity each year, transportation of 7.7 billion tons of freight, and 11.5 million jobs. The NASA ISRO, Synthetic Aperture Radar, will give a detailed view of the Earth, which would be cool to see the Earth, and as well as track ecosystem disturbances and ice sheet collapse. It also help locate natural hazards like volcanoes and tsunamis more precisely, so we can track them and make sure we get the right people in the right places when emergencies strike. What can't be measured? As NASA funding has decreased, so too has our visions of the future. Nothing sits the human mind to wonder like the vast expanses of space, since you really can go on pretty much forever. A lot of revered figures of human history and great explorers are great scientists. Unfortunately, exploration of planet Earth has died off since we're now living everywhere, and with GPSs and satellites from NASA, we can track and see pretty much our whole Earth. In terms of scientists, great minds have always observed the heavens, and by increasing our emphasis on extraterrestrial goals, we can, as a population, re-romanticize the final frontier and inject some fresh horrors into our culture. Look back to the moon landings and look how much of the celebrity status the astronauts had, and even tang, which the astronauts bring to the moon. Conclusion. Funding NASA will be a long-run benefit to the public by at least 2 to 1. In the 1960s and early 70s, the U.S. taxpayer got $14 worth of benefit for every $1 in tax they paid for the Apollo missions. Promoting more NASA funding will result in more engineering and scientific breakthroughs, which can be applied to regular life, not necessarily space, and provide America and Americans with the next generation of cultural icons like NASA's. And this is all why we'd like to increase the budget for NASA. We found this Penny for NASA by Neil deGrasse Tyson, which is if we took the entire U.S. federal tax budget and made it equivalent to $1, that would be giving 1 penny to NASA, which is equivalent to about 30 million. And we'll just watch this short video here.
Here's what happened. In the 1960s, we were at war with the Soviet Union, Cold War, and a little bit of hot war over in Southeast Asia. So we fear them because they put up Sputnik, which, by the way, people forget, was an emptied-out casing of an intercontinental ballistic missile. And Sputnik itself means fellow traveler, so it's all peaceful, but it was a ballistic missile head without explosives. So that was a signal, and we freaked in America. So NASA got founded on the fear factor of Sputnik. All right, so we then go to the moon on the fear factor that Russia will control high ground. Then we go to the moon. Space enthusiasts say, oh, we're on the moon by 69, we'll be on Mars in another 10 years. They completely did not understand why we got to the moon in the first place. We were at war. Once we saw that Russia was not ready to land on the moon, we stopped going to the moon. That should not surprise anybody looking back on it. Meanwhile, however, that entire era galvanized the nation. Forget the war, driving it. It galvanized us all to dream about tomorrow, to think about the homes of tomorrow, cities of tomorrow, the food of tomorrow. Everything was future world, future land. The World's Fair, all of this was focused on enabling people to make tomorrow come. That was a cultural mindset the space program brought upon us, and we reaped the benefits of economic growth because you had people wanting to become scientists and engineers who are the people who enable tomorrow to exist today. And even if you're not a scientist or technologist, you will value that activity, and that in the 21st century are the foundations of tomorrow's economies. And without it, we might as well just slide back to the cave, because that's where we're headed right now, broke. I'm tired of saying this, but I'll have to say it again. The NASA budget is 0.4 of 1 penny on a tax dollar. If I held up the tax dollar and I cut horizontally into it 0.4 of 1% of its width, it doesn't even get you into the 8. So I will not accept a statement that says we can't afford it. Do you realize that the $850 billion bank bailout. That sum of money is greater than the entire 50-year running budget of NASA. And so when someone says we don't have enough money for this space program, I'm asking, no, it's not that you don't have enough money. It's that the distribution of money that you're spending is warped in some way, that you are removing the only thing that gives people something to dream about tomorrow. The home of tomorrow, the city of tomorrow, transportation of tomorrow. All that ended in the 1970s. After we stopped going to the moon, it all ended. We stopped dreaming. And so I worry that decisions that Congress makes doesn't factor in the consequences of those decisions on tomorrow. They're playing for the quarterly report, they're playing for the next election cycle, and that is mortgaging the actual future of this nation. Tomorrow's gone.
And that concludes our pennies for NASA or NASA funding project. Thank you.